This is the Talkin Bout The Hoosiers podcast, presented by HoosierIllustrated.com. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to the Talking About the Hoosiers podcast, presented by HoosierIllustrated.com. I'm Drew Rosenberg, joined by Kyler Staley, as always. Episode 29. We got a big show today. Indiana basketball recruiting. Indiana basketball is back in action for the first time this year with a huge scrimmage. The Hoosiers football, Kurtis Rourke, 7-0 game day. So a lot to talk about. Kyler, how are you doing today?
Good. There is a lot to talk about. And that's what I love about this time of year, because there's just never ending content. So we're just, talking about everything when it comes to this. So obviously you've got some big recruiting news that just popped off before we recorded this. Basketball's starting back up on Sunday. Super excited about that. And then, Indiana's got a dominant football team, a really, really fun football team. So just a lot to talk about today.
Yeah, you mentioned it. Big recruiting news. Indiana target 5-star guard Braylon Mullins announced his commitment to UConn. Over the last kind of week or so, seems like it had very much shifted from Indiana as the favorite to, UConn. Dan Hurley saying he's been the guy in college basketball the last 3 years. So, it's a very tough loss for the program.
It is, just considering the fact that it is a 5-star guy, and it's also a guy that's in your backyard. So that's what they're going to look at. A lot of the Indiana fans and a lot of the, national media, if Indiana is recruiting some kid that's in the state, there should be no reason that they lose out on these types of recruits. And we've seen it all too often, going back to the Tom Crean era, and just very rarely do you see like these top guys stay in state. And if they do, they're playing for Purdue or something like that. So this one stings. It does sting for a little, bit, but it's not the end of the world by any means, I would say, for Indiana, because we've seen what Mike Woodson can do when it comes to recruiting, in the spring. He's done very well in the transfer portal, as well as we saw this past offseason. So it's not, break glass in case of emergency. It's not anything like that, but it does sting because Braylon Mullins was a guy that they did recruit for a very, very long time, built a really strong relationship. But I think, honestly, it came down to, the relationship and the connection that Braylon had with Dan Hurley, and, the vision that Dan Hurley wants to use Braylon, and the way that Dan Hurley coaches. His style of offense is very, very fun, very exciting. And I think, as a player standpoint, I think Braylon fits that offense, very, very well. A lot of shooting, a lot of, coming off dribble, things like that, things that Braylon can do. So, stings at the end of the day, but, at the end of the day, it's not a big, huge deal, because Indiana has a chance to obviously focus on this season, but, find other guys in the transfer portal next year, or get a late, spring commit.
Yeah, I mean, already have Trent Sicily's commitment, which is, good that they're not, 0 for right now, but it definitely does hurt. They had a big weekend earlier in the fall. I think it was Sicily, Reeb, and Mullins, and was Harrelson was there the week before, I want to say.
Like a couple weeks before.
And going, 1 for 4 on 3 in-state guys. Reeb's or bunch of in-state guys.
Yep.
It hurts. That's something. Changing the program and getting back to national prominence, that will help solve these issues of landing these in-state kids. Because Woodson, let's call it how it is, last year was bad, and that's the last time Mullins got to see Indiana basketball.
Yeah, absolutely. So sorry to cut you off, Drew, but I just wanted to make a good point, because you do make a good point about the offense and style. We've heard Mike Woodson talk about this offseason. We're going to go small ball. We're going to change up the style of offense or whatever. Braylon Mullins hasn't seen that yet. He just hasn't. Nobody's seen that yet. So, you can take a coach's word for it. Sure. But the proof is in the pudding when it comes to UConn. Their style of offense works. I mean, they've won back-to-back national championships, could be competing for a third straight this year. So, I mean, the proof's in the pudding with that, with Dan Hurley. But, until these recruits, these in-state guys, whoever's watching Indiana, who's being recruited by Indiana, until they see changes or whatnot, they're going to probably, have one kind of thought about Indiana basketball and how Mike Woodson coaches. If Mike Woodson can prove that, like, hey, I'm going to adapt, I'm going to play a smaller style, I'm going to play a much more fast, up-tempo style, that would fit someone like a Braylon Mullins. But right now, the best spot for Braylon Mullins is to go, play for a national, compete for a national championship under Dan Hurley, who's arguably the best coach in the country right now.
Yeah, and it makes a lot of sense why Woodson has not had any trouble recruiting bigs. If you watch Indiana play the last 3 years, it's been very much inside out. Focusing on first 2 years it was Trace Jackson Davis, last year's Khalil Ware. So for a guy like Omar Ballo who committed, it's like, okay, I see the vision that I can be the focal point of this offense. And for guards like a Braylon Mullins, and even going back to Liam McNeely, and even Eric Reba, I guess Eric Reeves a big, but going back, they want to play a more up tempo that fits their style of play a lot better instead of just an inside out, very slow, grinded out type of game. And that's the thing with Hurley. I mean, if you watched UConn over the last few years, they want to push the ball, they want to shoot the three ball, and Indiana hasn't. And that's something that this year could change. I mean, Mike Woodson has built a roster that can do all the things that a modern offense should do, including push the ball in transition, shoot threes, and space the floor while also being able to attack inside. But again, we haven't seen it yet. Versus with Dan Hurley and UConn, we've seen it consistently, and it makes a lot of sense why a Braylon Mullins type player would want to go to UConn.
Yeah, funny thing is, I got a text from an Indiana fan when Braylon officially did commit to UConn. He said, Dan Hurley is single-handedly ruining my life right now. Because it is kind of, I wouldn't say ironic or anything like that, but it is tough because, 3 of your biggest recruits, going back to Liam McNeely, going to Eric Reeve, and now Braylon Mullins, Dan Hurley's just taking it to the Hoosiers right now when it comes to these recruits, just taking away these guys from them. Mike Woodson's done a good job when it comes to beating out Kansas for some of these recruits, but the other way around, UConn is just taking all these guys. So you got to think, if there's a guy that Indiana's recruiting, Mike Woodson's recruiting, and he sees that UConn's getting into there, there's probably a little bit of worriness when it comes to that. So Dan Hurley, he's the man right now. He's a guy that everyone wants to go play for. I think Braylon's going to have a really good career when it comes to UConn. I think he's going to fit into Dan Hurley style pretty well. So I'm excited to watch him play. Stings that he's not obviously in an Indiana uniform, but he's still going to be a really, really fun player to watch next season in college basketball.
Yeah, you know who I really blame for all of this, Kyler? I blame LeBron.
Why is that?
Because Dan Hurley could have been the Lakers coach, and LeBron had to handpick JJ Redick.
Let's just say that's a podcast for another time. So you can mention that when you go on In Touch with Indiana Sports to talk about NBA stuff. You can go ahead and mention that.
Yeah, we'll preview Friday. I'll be on talking all things NBA, but back to Indiana basketball. Moving away from recruiting, Indiana basketball, we're going to get our first look at the Hoosiers when they traveled to Knoxville to face Tennessee in a charity exhibition. Very exciting because this is just, kind of new for Indiana. We haven't really seen, one, a public scrimmage, but 2, a public scrimmage of this talent against a very, very good opponent.
Yeah, absolutely. There's always these secret scrimmages Indiana used to do under Archie. I think they maybe did one for under Woodson's first year. I can't remember, but these are kind of becoming kind of the norm, I would say, in college basketball going back to last year. These charity exhibitions, which I think is a great way to, get a really good game, that doesn't count towards your season or anything like that. And it's the first look for these guys. So it is on SEC Plus, so that does kind of suck because a lot of people are going to have to pay to watch it. But pretty exciting because just ready to see what Indiana's got. Put them on the floor against a different opponent other than themselves. They have the scrimmage at Hoosier Hysteria. That is what it is. But you're going in, you're going to play against a really good Tennessee team. I don't know exactly they're ranked or not off the top of my head.
Number 12.
Number 12. So, literally a few spots ahead of Indiana. So pretty similar style of plays, I would think. Rick Barnes has done a really, really good job when it comes to recruiting, Tennessee, bringing that basketball program up, a school that's, often considered a football school. They're very tough when it comes to basketball as well. So it'll be fun. 2 programs you don't get to see a whole lot. Mm-hmm. So it's going to be fun to see what kind of lineups Mike Woodson runs with, what guys are going to play. Is Ja'Kai Newton, is Trey Galloway going to play? Are they going to get some run any? And just seeing how, the different styles work. Is Malik and Omar Ballo, are they going to be able to coexist on the floor? Is the spacing going to be a lot better? What are the guards like? What's the shooting like? It's just going to be fun. They're not going to be able to answer every single question that many fans probably want to be answered this game, but there's going to be a lot of takeaways for sure.
Mm-hmm. My one thing I'm very much looking forward to is how the guards play, because they are going to have a very tough matchup. Sakai Ziegler, it's weird because he shouldn't be, but it feels like he's sliding under the radar. This season, is he should be considered one of the best returning guards in college basketball. I mean, he's been Last year for Tennessee, averaged 12.6 assists. Unbelievable passer. I think the only real flaw in his game is he's 5'9", but he's so quick, and for his size, he's a very good defender. Has averaged at least 1.5 steals every year of his collegiate career, and just has been all around a great player for them. So seeing how Miles Rice, Cannon Carlisle, if he plays, if Galway plays, see kind of how they match up with that quicker guard. That's something, we've seen Indiana struggle with in the past. We saw it against Miami. Miami's guards in the tournament 2 years ago killed the Hoosiers. So seeing how these guards are able to defend as the Kai Ziegler is going to be big, especially Cannon Carlisle, because all summer, all offseason, all we've heard about how he is a savant on the defensive end. So I'm very curious to see how he matches up against Ziegler.
Yeah, and I feel like that's kind of an under the radar kind of what can you say? Kind of an under the radar takeaway, I guess. People are talking about the offense. What's the offense going to look like? Talking about the defense. That's Mike Woodson's bread and butter, right? Yeah. So there was times last year early on in the season, the Indiana defense was not good, terrible about switching off the screens, getting out and guarding the three. They were not good. So like you mentioned, I'm pretty excited to see what Miles Rice, what Cannon Carlisle can do on the defensive end. Gabe Cupps is another guy I'm excited to see what he can do in year two. So it's definitely going to be a lot more fun. Obviously, it's going to come down to, how's the shooting going to look? What's Mackenzie and Baca going to look like? What's Luke Goody going to do? And then what's the spacing? Those are going to be the few things that Indiana fans are going to be looking at. Like I said, I feel like we talked about a little bit leading up to this, but like I've said many times, this is a scrimmage, so it's not going to be perfect. Indiana could get blown out this game. They could, lose a close game, win a close game, blow out Tennessee. It doesn't matter. None of it really matters at the end of the day. It's all about for the coaches, what works, what doesn't work, and what they need to fine tune before the season, officially gets started here in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, and it's one of those things. I mean, you mentioned you don't want to put too much stock into this game. It's same thing with the scrimmage in Hoosier area. It was great to see Miles Rice. His Spurs just see his ability to create, but at the same time, until we see that on the actual, in real games against good competition, it doesn't matter. That's the truth. And a guy could come in, hypothetically, someone could come in and knock down 6 threes against Tennessee, and we're going to have all this hype. But if they go into the season and they aren't knocking down shots consistently, it's not going to matter. So this is one of those things. It's a good test. It's a good kind of benchmark to see where Indiana kind of can stack up against one of the better teams in college basketball. But at the same time, I don't know if how the scrimmage is being run, if it's going to be controlled where it's situational or if it's just going to be a regular 40-minute game.
I think it's a regular game. I'm pretty sure it is. Okay. I haven't watched any. I know there's been a few. There's been a few big games, but I think it's a regular game, if I can remember correctly. I may be wrong, so don't obviously, write that in Sharpie or anything, but I think it's a regular game.
But either way, it'll be, a good test, good chance for Indiana to, I guess, work on, because they've talked about it. It's not a completely new offense, but they are trying to implement a lot of new things offensively, including pushing the ball and transition a lot more, especially when you have guys like Miles Rice, Cannon Carlisle, who that's, especially Rice, it seems like that's where he's at his best, when he's pushing the ball with guys running on the wings, because he either finds the right guy or scores for himself. So seeing those kind of things, for the first time, it's going to be a good test. But again, it's important not to put too much stock into it.
Absolutely. And then obviously you've got Sunday, which is the big, exhibition game. And then still in that same week, you've got their second exhibition game with Marion, which will be a fun little game because obviously Marion's got a lot of in-state guys, and they played them last year, which was really fun. And then you got Pat Knight, the son of Bob Knight, who's the head coach of Marion. And a lot of people don't know this. Adam Howard, his dad is also an assistant coach at Marion as well. So a lot of family ties there. That'll be a second chance for Indiana. You're going to blow out Marion. You're going to do whatever you need to do with that. But just another, shake the rust off type of game before you actually get into the season. It's crazy to think that we're less than 2 weeks away from basketball. It really is. Because, it's been a fun football season right now, but it's about to get really, really busy here in the next
I was thinking about that. Usually, like, by now, this is when Indiana fans, have fully, out on football and now have moved their attention to basketball. And now you have three, including the women's team, who's also top 25. You have 3 very good teams who all deserve attention. So being an Indiana Hoosier, it's a good problem to have. It's having 3 great teams is a great problem to have. But again, It's gonna be a busy couple weeks or months, I guess, for Hoosier fans and us covering the team.
Yeah, remember the media. We got to cover all of this stuff. So, send out a prayer for us, that we don't get too stressed out. But it's going to be fun because I think right now it's like, especially during like the fall and, September, October, there's no basketball or anything. So it's just like, man, you're waiting for that next year. You're waiting a long 7 days, but there's going to be basketball in between now that you can watch and you can just, focus on that a little bit. And then when Saturday comes around, you're refreshed. You're ready to go for the football game. So, going to be a really, really fun time. This is definitely one of the more fun years, I think, already that, I can remember covering Indiana, that I've had, just the excitement for Indiana basketball, the women's team who's going to come in and be a force, in the Big Ten once again. And the football team, what Signetti's done, it's just been great. It's been super, super fun. And if you're an Indiana fan, you're loving life right now.
Yeah, we have Hoosier basketball pretty much every Saturday for the next month or two going forward, even when, or Hoosier athletics, not basketball. We have football every Saturday, and then on the bye week, Indiana plays South Carolina in Bloomington. So then another big game in Bloomington. So there is so much to be excited about, but we kind of hinted at it. So let's slide over to football. Indiana football 7-0 now. I mean, what more can we say about this program? I'm going to talk a little bit about Nebraska. 56-7. Everyone came in. Oh, they haven't played anyone. Who've they beaten? Nebraska, their run defense, their pass defense is going to shut them down. Hoosiers that don't have an answer for Raiola. I saw it all going into that game. I thought Indiana would win. We both predicted them to win, but we both thought it would be a close game. Not like this. I don't think either of us saw 56-7 ever.
No, not at all. The funny thing is you were just talking, a lot of things were popping up in my head. First of all, we talked about, the over under with that game, is Indiana going to get it? Indiana got the over by themselves.
Yeah.
Which is crazy to think. So, and then also, I remember, I was at the game on Saturday covering it. We had our post-game wrap-up and stuff. And after we got done with that, I still couldn't believe what I just saw. It was a complete spanking. That's what it was. That's exactly.
Belt to ass.
Belt to ass. Yes, that's exactly it. It was bad. I mean, it really was. You gotta love it. The national media still pretty hesitant when it comes to this Indiana team, and even after that dominant victory over Nebraska, I feel like there's still people a little bit hesitant with Indiana. Okay, when's it going to be, the bad parts about Indiana? When's that going to come up? But they talked about all the time. Nebraska's got one of the tougher defense. I mean, they're going to shut down Indiana. They are arguably the best defense in the Big Ten, blah, blah, blah. Kurtis Rourke did his thing. Signetti did his thing. Elijah Surratt did his thing, which, I mean, throw the ball to him, he's going to catch it.
Yeah.
And they all did
run
that.
Game.
The run game. Yeah. Justice Ellison was a dog, Tyson Lawton, the dog. So, the funny thing is they did all this pretty much in the first half. And then, obviously Kurtis Rourke gets hurt, a little worrisome there, but Taven Jackson comes in and just balls out. And he looks so much better and a lot more comfortable in this type of offense than what he was under Tom Allen. So this team is just so deep. And the funny thing is, last year and the year before that, we talk about, by this time, it's like, it's the same things over and over again. It's Indiana. They're depleted. It's just not fun to do. It's not fun to watch or anything like that. It's the opposite. We're talking about the same things over and over again. It's just getting more fun and more fun. So it was a complete beatdown against Nebraska, and Indiana's rolling right now. You cannot not pay attention to these guys now.
Yeah, I think, coming into that game, really biggest criticism with Indiana going in was their inability to force turnovers. Dylan Raiola, freshman quarterback. Yeah, you can say all that stuff. He's a freshman, against a good team, bright lights. He had only thrown 3 interceptions on the season. He threw 3 in that game. 2 forced fumbles. I think both of them were on 4th down too. Hoosiers made big stops when it mattered most. And that's the thing that we haven't seen in the past. And I'm kind of done moving, talking about the Indiana of old, of the when is Indiana going to fall. This is Curt Cignetti's Indiana football. This is not, our parents' Indiana team. This is a completely new era of Indiana football. Curt Cignetti, it's discipline. They play the right way, and it's always next man up. And even with Taven Jackson, I mean, you mentioned it slowed down a little bit. They weren't nearly as aggressive throwing the ball downfield. Still 28 points. They scored the same amount of points in the second half as they did the first half. So one of those things, it's just this team is dominant. Nebraska, cut the deficit. It was 14-7. Indiana went on to score 42 straight points from then on out. 5 for 9 on third down. But the biggest stat of the game for me, Nebraska was 0 for 5 on fourth down. Indiana had 5 crucial stops when it mattered most, and they just made big play after big play.
Yeah, and I excuse me if you mentioned this just a minute ago, but I think this was the first time that Nebraska's allowed a rushing touchdown.
Mm-hmm.
So, and they did that first drive, and they almost did it with what was it, like a 43-yard run with Justice Ellison, and then they just punched it in eventually. So, it just was funny to see
five rushing touchdowns. Yeah,
crazy. I mean, pretty much matched the season total of games almost in a way.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah.
It doesn't get easier for Nebraska. They got to go on the road and play at Ohio State. I think this is probably a game where they were wanting to prove a lot. We talk about Raiola. He is a talented quarterback, even though he did struggle that game, but he's also a true freshman. And that Indiana defense is very, very experienced. They pressured him. They caused a lot of havoc. And then if you just, if the defense does their job, the offense has the ball, right as soon as the defense gets off the field, you just expect Indiana's offense to score every time. When Nebraska had that touchdown, you just almost assumed and you just knew that Indiana's offense was just going to answer to that. They get punched, they get knocked down, they get back up, and then it's just a repeat every single time. So it is a beatdown, absolute beatdown. They're moved up to number 13 in the nation. I struggle to think that there's 12 better teams in Indiana right now. I think they're a top 10 team. Coming into this weekend, Washington's a team that's pretty much struggled, I would say, for the most part this season. The last game that I can remember them playing, I think they're coming off a bye as well, but they went on the road, got beat badly by Iowa 40-10, and we all know how bad Iowa's offense is. For the fact that they put up that many points is pretty incredible. So coming into this weekend, Indiana's got another chance to just prove like, hey, we're legit and we're just going to take care of business.
Yeah, I want to bring something up just to highlight the offense. James Evans was going into this year with some opportunities to break some punting records for Indiana football. I don't know if he's going to have that chance because of how little he's punted the football this year. Just 11 punts on the year in 7 games.
That's nuts.
For reference, as a freshman, 69 punts, 75 the year after, and then 57 last year. That's it. Around 5-6 punts a game for that stretch of 3 years versus 11 punts in 7 games. It's less than 2 punts a game.
That's crazy. And then also you consider the fact, and I've got a question to ask you, Drew, after this. You also consider the fact, I don't think Cignetti likes kicking field goals. I really don't think so. I mean, if they're in a position where they have to kick a field goal, yeah, he'll do it. But we saw, I think, the worst drive of the game for Indiana, and there wasn't very many. The worst drive of the game is when they went forward on fourth down and didn't get it and had a turnover on down and stuff. You probably could have kicked a field goal there. You're definitely in range. But just the fact that, he just doesn't like it. He likes to score touchdowns. That's what he's going to do.
My question, it's kind of, I wonder what he's seeing at practice where he isn't giving, Nicholas Radicic really a chance, because Radicic is I guess he's a redshirt freshman, but his career
too, I'm pretty sure.
Okay. But he has 4 field goal attempts this year. All of them are in his career long is 37.
So yeah, pretty average.
He hasn't missed a kick in his career, including almost 50 extra points. I think 5 total field goal attempts, but it's all been chip shots. So it's kind of, what does his range actually look like? Because, warm-ups is one thing, we can see that, but clearly it's either Cignetti just trusts the offense that much, or there's something up with the kicking game. Because what happens when Indiana, down the stretch needs, 45-yard field goal to win a football game, which all of us football fans or those who watch football know that is something that happens so often. Is it something they can't rely on? Because, we saw Arizona State's coach kind of talking about, their kicking game is atrocious and it changes the way they call a game. Is it something like that, or is it Cignetti's just so confident in his offense?
I don't think he has any problem with, kicking the ball. That not necessarily. I think he's just an aggressive coach. I think he just trusts the offense so much that he's like, we're in kind of no man's land or whatever. He's like, we're going to go for it on fourth down, or we're going to score touchdowns. That's what he wants to do. Kind of on the same path, a little bit different. Here's the question I want to ask you, Drew, because Dylan Traeger, who also is a staff writer for HoosierIllustrated.com, so definitely read his stuff. But him and I were up in the press box and we were asking each other, and I said, hey, what do you think Indiana's weakness is for this team. And we legit sat there for maybe 5 minutes and could not think of hardly anything. And then we were just kind of giving lackluster answers. Like, maybe it's this. What do you think it is, Drew?
I think two come to mind for me. I think the secondary has been inconsistent, I think, throughout the season. I think last week they were very, very good. Sean Asbury was all over the field. Amari Farrell made plays. Pons has been good. But I do think they've had stretches where they've struggled against the pass, and we've seen that often. And then the other area I'd kind of go to, and it's not as much of a weakness, it's just kind of a lack of depth at the linebacker. Behind, you have Aiden Fisher, who is, the quarterback of the defense, and Jalen Walker, but behind them, it does not really seem you have much. Cignetti trusts guys that Cignetti trusts, or not just Cignetti, but Brian Haynes trusts to put on the field. So what happens, we saw Jalen Walker get hurt. Bye week came at a perfect time for him. He was able to get back for Nebraska. But behind them, there's certainly question marks in my mind.
Yeah, I think that's a great answer. That's definitely something I wasn't even thinking about. So going into the season, I think a lot of people were worried about the offensive line, and honestly, they've become a strength because the running backs, the running game's been great. Kurtis Rourke has had all the time in the world to throw a pass, and he's been accurate with his passes. So offensive line's doing his job.
Yeah.
I think as the coach Bostad, is that
Bostad.
He's just done a great job. I mean, he was the only guy from the Tom Allen regime that stayed, that Kurt Cinetti kept. There's a lot of respect there, and the players really like playing for him. So that was an awesome hire. That was the last probably good thing that Tom Allen did was hire him. So, very few weaknesses. You mentioned good points there, but very few weaknesses for this Indiana team, which is a great thing to have.
Yeah, you mentioned the offensive line play. I want to highlight that before we, preview Washington. With the offensive line, the play, it's been very, very good, but I want to give kind of a shout out. You mentioned Bob Ostad. Going into this offseason, we talked about some key, transfer additions, Nick Kidwell, Tyler Stevens, Trey Weedig. Only one of them, Weedig, is the only one who is starting. Kidwell, I believe it's Kidwell.
Yeah.
Is out for the year, was ruled out, and then Stevens ended up on the bench. Bray Lynch and Drew Evans were guys on the roster last year who have stepped up and become really cornerstone pieces at the guard spot for Indiana. And that's a testament to Bob Bostad, because no one had that as those two guys being, as good as they've been, opening up holes inside. And Carter Smith has done what he's done his entire career. Mike Kadick has been great, help being the leader on that group. And Trey Weedig, I mentioned him. He's a guy, I loved him at Wisconsin. He never really got that role. He was, originally recruited like when Bostad was at Wisconsin, so kind of followed Bostad back to Indiana. And it was someone I was like, could be a huge piece for Indiana. The O-line has been so good. Indiana's second in the entire nation in rushing touchdowns, only behind Army. Army, the team that does not throw the football. That is the only team that has more rushing touchdowns in college football than Indiana. Two different players earn the top 20 in rushing touchdowns, Tyson Law and Justice Ellison. Each have 8 rushing touchdowns on the year. What Indiana is doing in the ground game, we've talked about Kurtis Rourke, Elijah Surratt, Omar Cooper, Miles Cross, Miles Price. The passing game is phenomenal, but the run game might be even better.
Yeah, I mean, just a lot of credit to that, offensive line. You did a really good job of breaking them down. Mike Kadick, he's the guy for him. I mean, he's the leader. He's the guy that put his name in the NFL draft and then came back because he saw the vision. Bostad did a really good job of saying, hey, come in and you can play center for us. I think he was a guard last year, if I can remember correctly. So came in, he's been phenomenal for them. He's been the leader. It's just a tight-knit group. So definitely one of the strengths, for this Indiana football team.
Yeah, and, moving now to this week, Indiana football, their newest test. I was going to ask you, Kyler, it got a little dark in your in your room.
Yeah, for you people watching and stuff, it was getting a little dark. I got the windows open, so it was getting a little dark. I couldn't hardly see Drew, his beautiful face.
Oh, thanks, Kyler. But Hoosiers looking to get 8-0, but national stage last week, it was Big Noon kickoff and the Barstool kickoff. This week, College GameDay. Pat McAfee has been pretty much openly begging for game day to come to Bloomington. We didn't really know, when it would work just with the schedule. And it seemed like game day said, you know what, Indiana doesn't need because let's call it how it is. Washington's 4-3. They're not as good as a lot is an Ohio State or even like Michigan that's left on the schedule or Nebraska last week on paper. So it was one of those things. Where could that game? And I think Indiana or ESPN just said, you know what, we need to get to Bloomington. First time a game day will be in Bloomington on a Saturday in the program's history. The only other time was a Thursday kickoff against Ohio State, which I'm not going to talk about how that game ended because it was not pretty for the Hoosiers. But a lot of eyes are going to be on the program this weekend.
Absolutely. I mean, the most eyes you could possibly get is going to be on the program. Other than this being a late night under the lights, 7:30 game, it's big. I mean, this season, just more and more history. Markers are set, more goals are met in this. The fact that you're getting College Game Day, nobody. We were talking about this team finishing 6-6 this year. Being bowl eligible barely. Maybe winning 7 games. But the fact of the matter is, nobody thought College Game Day was going to be there. Nobody thought this team was going to be competing for a college football playoffs, and it's still so surreal. It's just crazy, and it's going to be huge. It's going to be electric. The fans are going to be there. I guarantee you right now, we're recording on a Wednesday night. I guarantee you right now that there's already students already camping out trying to get spots, for College Game Day. So it's going to be spectacular. Pat McAfee's been great. Signetti was awesome on Pat McAfee last week. So he's obviously a big Signetti fan. College Game Day was at JMU last year, so Signetti was on there, so he is familiar with it. It's going to be fun to see him interact, with the college. Well, actually, he probably won't be involved.
No, it's a noon kick. I doubt he will.
If he is, it'll be very, very early in the broadcast, around 9 o'clock. But it's going to be awesome. I mean, it's definitely going to be a great atmosphere, and pretty much, I feel like they just were like, this is the game to do it. We got to, in case something does happen where Indiana does lose momentum, which it doesn't look like they're going to, get it on campus. The place is going to be fired up. It's another sold-out crowd, which every single home game from here on out is sold out. So another monumental, milestone for this team. So you mentioned it. Washington's very mediocre in a lot of ways. So it could have been Michigan. Probably would have been the best on paper game for them. But we're going to be there. The whole cast is going to be there. Lee Corso, the former head coach of Indiana football, he has a homecoming, which I think that's really, really cool. And I think it's going to be really special for him. So really, really excited for this. And it's just going to be a great, great atmosphere.
Yeah. I want to, if you haven't watched Signetti's, when JMU was on game day last year, I'd recommend it. He had a very funny quote, do we like the NCAA? And the entire crowd started booing because of JMU's, little postseason band type of thing. So it was, very, very entertaining. Signetti, he is very good at, the on-camera stuff, hyping the crowd up and getting people kind of fired up about the program. Before we, really jump into the game, Kyler, you wanted to do this segment. Let's do it. Who's your prediction for who is going to be on College Game Days as a guest picker from Indiana? I want to preface this by saying Kyler has refused to tell me who his pick is, so if we have the same pick, it's his fault, not mine.
So, I think they're announcing it on Thursday who the guest picker is going to be. So definitely we're probably going to be wrong with this. So my pick is Victor Oladipo. I think he'll be the guy. He's a household name. A lot of people know him. I think he's popular enough to where he'll be on, game day and people be like, oh, it's Vic or blah, blah, blah and stuff. And he was for the Hall of Fame. He was there a few weeks ago as well. So he's definitely been following this Indiana football team. So I think it'll be Victor Oladipo, but I feel like there's a lot of guys that you could pick to be the guest.
I like that pick. That was not someone I was kind of thinking about. I wanted to say John Mellencamp, but I think because of him being on Big Noon, I doubt he does game day then immediately after. I have a couple guys. He said he hadn't been asked, but maybe he's been asked since. I think Joe Buck.
That'll be your guy. That's
my pick. Joe Buck has been very outspoken. Anyone who watches Monday Night Football knows Joe Buck is the Hoosier. He has sang the fight song on the broadcast. He has converted Troy Aikman, a UCLA alum, into a Hoosier fan. As Troy Aikman is apparently the biggest fan of Carl Signetti. If you don't know the joke, he referred to Kurt Signetti as Carl, but not the point. I think Joe Buck could be a really good fit. Indiana media school guy. One of the biggest names in sports media, has called so many legendary moments, and I just think it'd be, especially considering he also works at ESPN, that was kind of my thinking for the connection.
And I think Oladipo, since he's not on a team right now, he has been doing ESPN and like analysts for the preseason games at least. I don't know if he's going to do it for the regular season or not, but there's a lot of guys you can throw out. Mark Cuban would probably be a guy that they would try to go after. I think a fun one would be Trace Jackson Davis if they could get him. Warriors got a Friday night game at 9:30.
I don't know if Trace is a big enough name. I was thinking Trace too.
That's the worriness, right?
Because in Indiana, in the state of Indiana, he is a household name, huge name, and it works. But it's a national audience, and that's where I think the problem could come in.
Yeah, absolutely. But hopefully there's some way that Trace could be at the game at least because Taven's getting the run. He's going to be the starting quarterback for this game with Kurtis Rourke out, which we should, mention.
Yeah, we're going to jump in. We'll get that in a little bit.
We'll get to this here in literally 30 seconds. But there's a lot of names you can throw out. The Indiana alumni base is great. Do what?
Ken Nunn.
Ken Nunn. That was going to be your guy, wasn't it? See, Drew told me before we recorded that it started with a K. So
Ken Nunn. Ken Nunn, Indiana, IU Bloomington lawyer. You've probably seen him driving around in his Bentley.
Yeah, if it is him, then we got some serious problems there. But it'll be fun. Mike Woodson might even be a guy. Yeah. They could even get Mike Woodson's the biggest IU football fan right now. He loves talking about those guys. So it could be. There's a lot of people you can throw out. I'm excited to see who they pick on Thursday.
Yeah, and one more, I guess, moving off of game day, but one more thing I want to touch on, surrounding the game before we actually jump into the game. Former Indiana quarterback, former Washington quarterback Michael Penix shared his allegiance Sunday. I'm not sure. I know you saw, Kyler. I don't know if everyone saw, but he was asked about it. He said, a lot of people have asked me who I'm cheering for. And he said, I definitely want the Dub to win. At the same time, I'm an alum from Indiana, so there's no bad blood, but I want the Dub to win. Former Indiana quarterback Michael Penix he's going against Cignetti, which I would understand, if Kalen DeBoer was still at Washington and his coaches were there, but they're not. He has no ties pretty much either way. It's the same ties either way. 4 years at Bloomington, 2 at Washington. We're not going to hold it personal, hold it against Michael Penix, but, sad to see he's not rocking with Cignetti.
I mean, here's a tough pill to swallow. He transferred. I mean, his school that he got drafted from was Washington. He's not loyal to Indiana by any means. He's probably loyal to Washington, a lot more. So it makes sense to me. It makes sense to me that he would pick Washington for that. So, but no bad blood. We obviously, everyone, Indiana fans love Michael Penix and what he did for that one season that he was the Indiana quarterback.
Yeah, and let's jump into the game. Speaking of the quarterback position, I mean, we've talked about it a little bit. Taven Jackson starting for Kurtis Rourke. He came in for relief in the second half was very good. 7 for 8, 91 yards, 2 touchdowns, 21 rushing yards. Quick update on Rourke. Had surgery on Monday on his thumb. Prediction kind of seems to be 7 to 10 days for the injury. So it seems like he will be back for the Old Brass Spittoon game against Michigan State on the road a week from Saturday. But I wouldn't call that 100% by any means, but is out this weekend, and Taven Jackson will be the guy.
Taven Jackson, it's his time to shine, really. With Rourke, looks like it was called a nail bed injury, somewhere around there. Yeah. It looks like his whole nail got ripped off from his thumb.
Have you seen the picture, the still shot?
Yeah, it's disgusting. So
with his hand dripping blood as the nail is sticking out of the helmet. Oh,
yeah, disgusting. So I don't even want to talk about that because I'm going to puke on the podcast. But that's gotta hurt. That's gotta be painful. I've never had a nail ripped off of me. I don't want to have that. That's actually probably one of my worst fears that ever happens. But that hurts. So, and the fact is that happened. He went back in the game and threw a 60-yard pass, So that just shows you the toughness of Rourke. If the game was on the line or whatever, I guarantee you Rourke probably would have continued to play.
Yeah, I think so.
It was that tough. So, but Taven Jackson's the guy. Rourke is not going to be playing, but Taven Jackson, what we saw in the second half and what we've seen in spurts, different areas throughout the season, we haven't seen a whole lot of Taven other than last game.
Going back to the spring game, too. He played well that game, too.
He was balling because when that happened, there was kind of wouldn't say a quarterback controversy, but I think at that time I was like, Taven looks a lot better than Rourke.
Started the conversation a little bit.
Yeah, there was a little bit of fire to that. So, but yeah, Taven came in the second half and he was balling. He was consistent. He's so much more comfortable under Cignetti. The offense is simple with him. I feel like with Tom Allen, it's just a lot all over the place. You also had, a really bad offensive coordinator in Walt Bell last year. Just how it is, whatever. Yeah. It just wasn't good. The offense was always kind of out of the control and everything. But Cignetti said earlier this week they have 100% confidence in what Taven can do. Taven's a little bit more mobile than what Kurtis Rourke is too, so I'm excited to see what he can do with his legs. You just keep things simple for Taven. Just really do. Keep things simple. The wide receivers will get open. Offensive line's got to continue to be the strength of that offense and just open up the running lanes and let the running backs do their thing. So as long as Taven doesn't force anything, doesn't he get too flustered out there, Indiana will dominate this game just like they have, with Kurtis Rourke.
Yeah, I mean, it is a very, very tough task for Taven Jackson. I don't know how closely you've looked at the Washington pass defense. It's dominant. Through 7 games, only one quarterback has surpassed 130 passing yards. Opposing quarterbacks are completing just 47.5% of their passes. So it's been very tough to throw the ball against Washington. But on the flip side, the Washington run defense is not good. Opponents are rushing over 4 yards an attempt. You look at Washington State had a very easy running attack. Last week, Iowa ran for over 200 rushing yards. Rutgers had 184 rushing yards against them. Michigan, 175. You can run the football against Washington, and Indiana has averaged 200 rushing yards a game. Tyson Lott and Justice Ellison and the offensive line are going to be keys. I mean, it's been that way all year. The rushing attack has opened up chances down the field and passing the ball. And Indiana's going to rely on them. Curt Cignetti, Taven Jackson can play, but we saw in the second half, the offense still looked great, scored 28 points, but it was behind the running game. And I think that's going to be how it's going to be on Saturday. Cignetti is going to rely on that run game. It works out for Indiana very nicely. It's strength against a weakness. And they're going to ask Taven to do stuff. And the big thing for Taven, I mean, you mentioned it, he has to protect the football. Rourke throws the ball downfield. He does all these unbelievable things throwing the football. The best thing Rourke does is he protects the football, and it's been huge because Indiana wins turnover battles consistently. Cannot turn the football over. If he does that, Indiana football should have no problem this weekend.
I got a couple things. One, sticking with Taven, as long as the skill guys, the offensive line, those guys do their job and they step up like you expect them to do and make things easier for Taven, I think it'll be just fine. Taven just can't, overcomplicate things, I think. Now, the second point I want to make too, if Indiana goes out and dominates with Taven Jackson, that just shows you how good of a coach that Cignetti is. Yeah. Everyone already knows he's a good coach. I mean, it just shows you that his system works, and you can place any quarterback in there. I think that he would have 100% confidence if it was Tyler Cherry, honestly. And the other quarterback, Mendoza, I think is the other one. So I think he would have 100% confidence in all those guys. Honestly, it's just the blueprint that he always talks about. It's the blueprint, how we run our offense, the things that we do. It just works. So, there's going to be a lot of storylines with that. People are going to be a little bit nervous with Taven just because he's got that backup label. But he was Indiana's starting quarterback for a little bit last year. He's got experience to a certain extent. He's a talented player.
He's a 4-star for a reason.
4-star for a reason, committed to Tennessee. And I think Ant Wright, our good buddy, the guy that owns the Full Ride Network, I think he even said that Taven Jackson would probably be a starting quarterback in half of the Big Ten teams right now. So that just tells you a lot of praise with him. So as long as Indiana's offense can do their thing, the defense steps up and, doesn't allow any easy things for Washington. Keep giving Taven Jackson reps. I think he's going to be ready to go, and I think he's going to ball out.
Yeah, the biggest thing, you mentioned the defense, stopping. Jonah Coleman, Washington running back, is very, very good. A lot of hype is, deservedly so. Will Rogers has been very good this year, 13 passing touchdowns, just 2 interceptions, averaging nearly 300 passing yards a game. Their pass offense is very good. I'm stating that right now. They have a very good passing attack. Denzel Boston has 9 receiving touchdowns on the season. Pons is going to have a difficult task, but Jonah Coleman has averaged almost 7 yards a carry, is over 800 total yards in the season. He has been a workhorse for them. So stopping him is going to be key. Before we wrap up, Kyler, predictions from this game. Let me pull up the over-under in the spread just so I have it in front of us, because I think
it was around a touchdown the last time I saw it.
I think it was 6.5. If I want to say 6.5 is what I had.
It's a very interesting line.
Yep.
I think a lot of it has to do with Taven Jackson being the quarterback.
6.5 with the over under being 51.5. So Kyler, what is your, or no, that's what it opened at. Currently 53.5 over under, but 6.5 spread.
I think Indiana covers the spread. I have no reason not to believe that they don't cover the spread. I mean, they've covered. I think they've covered the spread every single game this year. I could be wrong on that,
they
but
are.
they have. I mean, there's no reason for me to not say that they won't. So if this was against Ohio State or even Michigan, I'd probably have a little bit different feel to it. But I think they're going to steamroll Washington. I really do. Now, as far as the over under, I picked the under, or I picked the over last week. Indiana covered that easily. 53 is a very weird number to me. I don't know what it is about it. It seems like it's a little bit too high, but I don't think they cover it this time. I think they win pretty handily, but I don't think they cover.
Yeah, my score prediction, I'm going back and forth a little bit. I'm going to stick with, I think, 20, or yeah, I'm going to go 20
points.
Wow. 27, 17. That's what I'm sticking with. I think we're going to see a different look to Indiana football this weekend. I think, instead of trying to push the ball downfield and big chunk plays, I would not be surprised if we see a more grinded out style of win. And that's a sign of a good team, being able to win in multiple ways. I think Cignetti realizes that without Kurtis Rourke, their passing attack, Taven Jackson is very capable, but I think they're going to lead on the run game and try to control the clock and really keep Washington's offense on the sideline as long as possible and really just shorten the game a little bit. So that's the only reason I only see 27 points. Indiana not surpassing that 40, that 40-point threshold they've hit now 6 straight games. It's just because I think they're going to play a little different style and try to slow the game down, or I guess really kill the game clock and just control the line of scrimmage.
Keep in mind, people that are listening, 2 things. 1, do not tail us, or do not
not at all.
Not at all. And 2, even if you are listening for our bets, just remember Drew was wrong last week. So
I was.
So just remember that. That's all I gotta say.
Overhit though.
The overhit. So if he's wrong on the predictions, I think Indiana's going to put up 30+ points. I think they are, but I just don't see Washington putting up very many points. I don't see Indiana going past 40 points this game. If they do, I shouldn't be surprised, but if they do, I'm going to be surprised. It's just crazy. I think they're going to win this game easily. But I don't think it's going to be a ton of points like we've seen.
I do think it's going to be tough, though. And I think Washington is I think their record makes them a little look worse than they actually are. I think they're a pretty good football team. Just they do have the holes defensively. And I think with Taven Jackson, if Kurtis Rourke was playing, I would have no doubts in this. But I do think there is a little slight doubt, like how does the offense look with Taven Jackson? Because Washington is probably going to load the box and do everything they can to stop the run. So it'll be, very interesting to see. And, as always, we're going to have all the coverage on Saturday. We're going to have coverage of the Tennessee scrimmage Sunday. Me and Dylan Traeger, who we mentioned earlier, will have the post-game wrap-up show because, Kyler, you are going as a fan, so, enjoy yourself. Have fun. Don't have too many, Hoosier Game Day loggers for me. But, yeah, as for all things IU athletics, follow Indiana_FRN on Twitter, Facebook, and check out the HoosierIllustrated.com website. And make sure you're subscribed on YouTube. Hoosier Illustrated has also partnered with Tom Brady's company Autograph to streamline our coverage so you can do what you do best. Follow IU Sports. Use the code INDIANAFR to get started today. Thank you for tuning in to the Talkin Bout The Hoosiers podcast. We'll be back next week.